Although summer's over and we just had our first day of fall, we still have no state budget. And here to talk to us about that is one of the members of the House Republican leadership, the Majority Whip, State Representative Bryan Cutler. Representative, welcome.
Thank you.
Now, it's been an interesting, to say the least, summer here in Harrisburg. We haven't really seen much done in regards to the budget and negotiating with the governor. We haven't seen him really bend at all. House Republicans put forth a no tax increase responsible budget, and the governor vetoed us. Can you give us a little update on what's been going on?
Sure. I think in order to understand where we're at today, you have to go back a little bit in terms of a timeline. The governor gave his address in March to the joint session of the House and the Senate, and to his credit, he proposed a tax package that would have fully funded his spending priorities. That tax package was put up for a vote on June the 1st and was unanimously defeated. Not a single Republican, not a single Democrat voted in favor of that.
Not only was it unanimously defeated, but it was also not put forth by any Democrats. It had to be put forth by a Republican, correct?
That's correct. Representative Grove from York County had attached it as an amendment to another tax code bill because we thought it was important to be fair to the governor and give an opportunity for his plan to be heard. However, as I mentioned, it was defeated unanimously, and I think that essentially reset the clock in terms of where we were at in terms of the budget, and we still had our obligation to meet the June 30th deadline in order to continue state operations and funding core services of government, schools, social services, all of the things that we're responsible for and were included in our budget that we did deliver to the governor by the end of the month, which he subsequently vetoed.
So after the veto, and let's talk about the veto a little bit, that was the first time in, I believe, our lifetimes that a governor did a full veto. He didn't go the blue line route, which we've seen Governor Rendell and Governor Corbett do in the past. What's the danger of that full veto? What are the implications now that we're into October?
Well, there's been a whole host of issues that have come up since the veto. The first, and I think probably the most important, is the fact that 68% of the budget, 274 out of the 401 budget line items, were in fact agreed to. They were level funds for certain services, increases for others, but most importantly, it was the numbers that the House Republicans and the House Democrats each had in their budgetary proposals, as well as the governor. Domestic violence centers, rape crisis centers, social service lines. And when you look at many of these line items, they were agreed to, and in my opinion, should not have been held up while we negotiated the rest of the approximately 1/3 of the budget. The second issue, and probably the bigger issue for many folks who provide these services, is the fact that it's not just the state money that is now held up through a complete veto. Had the line item veto been used judiciously, those items which are necessary and agreed upon could have been continued to receive funding. What's happened now is the lifeline of state funding has been completely cut, but in addition to that, it's held up all of the federal funding that is behind it, which is another $30+ billion for a variety of good programs that are continuing to serve people. And I think that's the other important piece to highlight. While we work on the budget, and we've continued to meet with the governor and his staff, and that's ongoing, these folks are continuing to provide services without receiving state funding. Many of them are forced to get lines of credit. Many of them perhaps are signing that on personal terms in order to keep their businesses afloat. And when you look at their services, they're now to the point where they've exhausted their lines of credit because we are in October, and now they're actually looking to either cut programs or even potentially shut the doors until we get this resolved.
And maybe naively on my part, when the governor announced he was vetoing the budget, he had mentioned that he was going to veto it, or he wasn't going to sign it. And he mentioned that he didn't really understand. He was new to the whole concept difference between the two. So I thought maybe there was a misunderstanding that he didn't realize that a blue line could be done, but House Republicans gave him the opportunity to reverse course on that mistake, and that was back on August 25th with veto overrides, and yet that also failed. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, the veto overrides were attempted in the House. While we had a majority of votes, it was 115-84, we did not have the 2/3 majority required in order to override the governor's veto. And again, these were line items such as funding for free and reduced lunch, a lot of federal funding, the rape crisis centers, domestic violence centers, just to name a few. And we attempted to override those vetoes, and it would have been an opportune time to say, let's move these issues off the table, they're agreed upon, but unfortunately that just did not happen. And as we go forward now, and I think it's important to note, dating back to the June 30th on-time, no-tax budget, to the veto overrides in August, to where we're at now, getting ready to consider the emergency funding package in the House this week. All of that has been about getting that money to those folks who so desperately need it. And like I said earlier, they're continuing to provide the services they deserve to be paid.
So now this is your first budget as the majority whip. You're in what they call the big table discussions. What's your impressions been, and what can you tell us what you've seen that I guess is different than being rank and file?
Well, obviously, it's a lot more time spent on the budget itself in terms of the line items and discussions with the governor and his staff, as well as our staff on all of those items. So that part's been very exciting. Truthfully, I share the frustration of many of the constituents in the district, as well as I'm assuming the Commonwealth overall, in that I wish this would come to a satisfactory resolution. Much of the budget is agreed to, so it would be nice to get those services funded while we debate the rest of the government spending package. And that probably has been the most frustrating and eye-opening experience for me personally. I'm not surprised when we talk to service providers and they say, let's get some resolution to this, let's compromise. The problem is, up until this point, the governor's position has been one of consistency, to his credit, that he wants his entire spending package as proposed back in March. However, as is often the case in both the House and the Senate, we have to work within the realms of possibilities, and in terms of getting 0 votes, we've got to find a compromise between his original proposal, which received no support, and our proposals, which passed the House and the Senate and were ultimately vetoed, but did have a majority of votes. So I think we all agree that it needs to be done. It needs to be done quickly for the sake of all who are counting on the funding, but most importantly, it needs to be done fairly, both for those who need the funding, but also for the taxpayers who pay for it.
Governor said multiple times that House Republicans are not willing to negotiate, that he's given, and he hasn't been given anything back. However, we know there was an offer of his full $400 million for education funding. Can you tell us a little bit about that offer and where that stands?
Sure. The discussions involving education funding were lengthy, and when you look at what the governor specifically had requested, he had requested an additional $300 million for a total of $400 million over last year's spending, $300 more than what he ultimately vetoed. So we attempted to work with him to find that solution. It was going to have to involve some cost savings through long-term pension reform, as well as some additional revenue, which we thought we could have gotten from liquor privatization. I think it's fair to say that education funding, liquor privatization, and pension reform are all very popular in the public. Constituents consistently express their frustration on all three to us, and we thought that that was an opportunity to find some common ground. Unfortunately, we weren't able to come to a solution on that proposal, but we're going to continue to work towards that because we recognize how important that is to everybody.
Now, as we sit here getting ready to final consideration of the emergency funding package, we've already heard that Governor Wolf has said that he has no plans on signing it. He's already ready to veto it. Again, what are the dangers of vetoing this emergency funding bill?
Well, I think that the dangers are exactly the same as they were in June. We will continue to have service providers that don't get funded if the line item veto is not used and a complete veto is exercised instead. We'll also have a series of other services that will no longer continue to be funding. For example, Erie School District voted that if they do not receive funding by October, they authorized their superintendent to shut the doors and limit hours in order to save money. So this is a real crisis in terms of funding for many of the governmental agencies that depend on it. And in terms of how things have been going so far, some programs continue to be funded. Some of it is federal money, which we simply had to file waivers. But one of my biggest questions continues to be what programs are in fact being funded and why? What's the legal justification? Because I understand some of it's under a court order, some of it's under federal requirements, and then some of it, if it's discretionary, I'd like to know what parameters are being used to make those decisions. I think it's very important that we have transparency in that process so that winners and losers aren't simply being picked while the budget impasse is ongoing. It needs to be equitable to every citizen of the Commonwealth.
And finally, what have you heard from the people of the 100th district? Do they want to see a budget with higher personal income tax, or are they willing to buckle down and wait for the responsible plan?
The answer to that has been an overwhelming no. We just recently had our local fair, the Solanco Fair, had well over 1,000 people cycle through the table that I was working, and as I went around the fairgrounds visiting folks, overwhelmingly the answers were hold firm, but try to find a compromise that doesn't entail the large tax increases. And I think that is that reasonable ground that I referenced earlier between what was vetoed and what the governor wants. Unfortunately, we don't yet have the required votes to override the governor should he continue to veto it.
All right, Representative Cutler, thank you for taking time joining us, and I know you got a busy couple days ahead, and hopefully we'll find out more as budget's passed. That's all the time we have for today's program. If you have any questions about any state-related matter, Representative Cutler's contact information will be on the screen in just a moment. Thanks for watching, and please join us again next time for another edition of Legislative Report.